Hello and welcome to Azure Terraformer. This was an audience member comment on one of my last videos about Terraform syntax for developers. The question was, how do dynamic blocks work? And I had just recently tweeted about this. You can follow me on Twitter at Mark Tinderholt. Link will be in the comments here. I post some little snippets every now and then, amongst other things, just to keep it fun. But so how do dynamic blocks work? I thought this was a great question because that was one of the really hardest syntactual things that I encountered when I was learning Terraform. So today, let's look at how we implement a dynamic block in a Cosmos DB account, which is something I tweeted recently. So here we have a pretty standard implementation of a Cosmos DB account. Cosmos DB supports a number of different block types. And if you go look at the documentation, so you'll know that it's a block when, let's look for the geolocation here, geolocation. In the documentation, it says requires a specified geolocation resource used to define where data should be replicated. Value is a geolocation block as defined below. So this is the key that indicates that this particular attribute is not a regular attribute that you just use the equal sign with. It's actually a block. And sometimes, depending on the implementation of the Terraform resource, that resource can be expecting exactly one of those blocks, or it could be expecting one or more of those blocks. So it's important to read the documentation to figure out whether, what that block, what the expectations are around that block. And usually lower down on the documentation, you're going to find the block definition. So here's the block definition, and this shows you the attributes on the block. And so here we have a location, we have a failover priority, and we have a zone redundant flag, which is optional. And so really we only need the location and we need the failover priority. So here I've got a location and a failover priority, and I'm not formatting them nicely, am I? So now this, implements one block, and if I want to add another block, I just copy pasta and say East US. Now this isn't super elegant or super maintainable. What if I just want? Oh, and I have to change the failover priority, otherwise it'll give me a problem. This is valid syntax though. But let's imagine a scenario where I might have hundreds, or dozens of particular entries for a block. It's not going to be fun. A good example is the Azure diagnostic setting. Go check that one out, where you just have these highly repetitive blocks. And so another scenario where this sort of approach is not great is when you want to dynamically scale, and you have like an array of objects that you want to generate blocks for. So there's a way of doing that called dynamic blocks. And so with dynamic blocks, first of all, we're going to need an array. So let me just declare a locals array. It's usually good, it's useful to have the structure of your array match what block you're trying to iterate across. That way, in your block definition, it's just a mapping exercise and there's no gymnastics going on. So I'm gonna try and do that here. I'm just gonna call this my geolocations, and it's gonna be an array. And then inside this array, I'm gonna declare two objects. Now I'm using dynamic types here, and I'm gonna set the location to West US. And I'm going to set the failover priority to 0. And then I'm going to add another object in here. I'm going to set it to location East US. And I'm going to set the failover priority equal to 1. And I may not actually need the commas there. So let's go validate the syntax. Yeah. So this is basically declaring a dynamically typed object. This object is not named. It has two attributes that are dynamically inferred by what I've coded here: location and failover property, or failover priority. That's it. So essentially what I have, and the way you can read this, is I have an array starting here on line 13, these square brackets, with two objects. Each object starts and is opened with a curly and closes with a curly. And each of those objects has two attributes: location and failover priority. There we go. So I've stubbed my data source, or my array that I'm going to use for my geolocations. Now, how do I structure a dynamic geolocation block? Well, what I always recommend is leave your, if you've got a hard-coded geolocation block started and you're trying to piece together how to make it dynamic, leave the hard-coded block while you construct your dynamic, because it provides a nice handy guide. So what happens, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go dynamic. Then you're going to, in quotes, you're going to give the name of the block. The block name is going to be, this string has to match the actual name of the block. So geolocation, okay? Then you're going to do open curly, close curly. Now the first line is going to be a for each statement. For each, and you're going to, this for each statement, you pass in an array. So for each item is an array. And I've got my array declared as my geolocations, so it's a local. I mean, you could technically use any array. It could be other resources, it could be other modules. Again, I'd highly recommend, for the sake of your sanity, to construct like a local array, so that you have just exactly what you need in order to construct this block. Otherwise, it's going to get really nasty. Now, here's where it gets a little weird, right? So unlike in our block where we just dump the attributes in there, the dynamic block syntax requires you to specify a content block. And this content block is essentially going to be like, let's pretend that we are now inside these curly braces. Let's pretend that we're inside this curly brace of the geolocation here. So now we implement this in the exact same way that we would, that we would a regular block, okay? But now, how do we reference that array that we've constructed in order to get the values out? So the way that we do that, this is again kind of counterintuitive, okay? But you use, to get out of the geolocation, you reference the actual block name. So you go geolocation and you go value. So what we're doing is, on this block called geolocation, this dynamic block called geolocation that we are inside of, we are accessing the current value. This can be thought of as the current value. So we're inside of this for each statement, and if you imagine, each one of these content blocks is going to be iterated across, and every time there's an iteration, the value is going to be the next one in that array. So this reference right here references the current object within the array, as we're iterating through it. And so now we can treat that object because like one of these instances that I've defined up here. One of these instances that I've defined up here, and these instances have the exact same syntax or structure as the block that I'm trying to construct. So I can literally just pipe in the location of my object, which is east, on the second time this iterates through, it'll be east US. And then for the failover priority, I can go geolocation.value and then failover priority. Now, I want to make things really clear. So I'm going to change the structure of my array just so you know things are different. So I'm going to give a 2 at the end of each of these attributes, so you can see what is actually on the object versus what's on the target destination block. So in the content block, we're setting the location of this occurrence of the block to this location2 attribute that's on my object within the array. And same with the failover priority, right? So again, these values, you could name these whatever you want. These attributes, you can name them whatever you want. Okay, they could be Mark's awesome failover priority or Mark's awesome location, and it would 100% work. But these values right here have to match the schema of the block that you're trying to dynamically build. So that's it. That's how dynamic blocks work. I hope you found this helpful. We'll run Terraform validate one more time. We're good. I hope you found this helpful. Again, this was an audience request. So anytime you're watching my videos, please feel free to leave me a comment. I love to see that. I love to engage with my audience and hear what problems you guys have and what you guys are curious about. Any resource types you're working with that you're having challenges with, I'd love to hear about that. And I can set it up to be subject of an upcoming video. So without further ado, please hit like and subscribe, and make sure you hit that notification bell so that you know when my next video drops. And until next time, this is Azure Terraformer signing off. Thanks again. See you.